situated the same. This is where the majority of the AP exam comes from. If you know this time period all the way up to Reagan, you're in good shape. This one's 1754. So why did they pick that random date again? Beginning of the French and Indian War. 1800? That's a round number, but yet they picked it for a reason. Yes.
The election of 1800.
What was significant about that election? Peaceful transfer of power. Two political parties changed hands. Government changed hands from one political party to another, and there was no violence done, which was extremely rare. It never happened actually in world history, and now hasn't happened once in American history. But we'll get to that tomorrow. Okay, so 3.1. Key concept. British attempts to assert tighter control over North American colonies and colonial resolve to pursue self-government led to independence movement in the Revolutionary War. The Revolutionary War. So the question easily here could be like, what led the British colonies to want to start the Revolutionary War or have self-government or something? The competition among British, French, Americans, and Indians led to 7 Years' War, or the French and Indian War, which Britain defeated France. Let's see here. Colonial rivalry intensified between Britain and France, growing population expanded, threatening the trade networks and Native Americans as well. B, Britain achieved major expansion of territorial holdings by defeating the French, but it was really expensive. So then you got to consolidate control, raise revenue, control the colonies more. So the end of salutary neglect after that. After the British victory, Imperial officers attempts to prevent colonials from moving westward generated opposition. Native groups sought to continue trading with the Europeans and stop the encroachment of the people coming over. Questions on the first one? The run up to the French and Indian War, and then the effects of the French and Indian War. Yes. The Iroquois Confederacy was the Confederacy of Native Americans, pretty much in New York, Pennsylvania, and into Michigan, a little bit in Ohio. That's the group that's going to side with the British during the war. The Hurons will side with the French during the war. So you could easily see a question, what were the causes of the French and Indian War, or what were the effects of the French and Indian War? Really easy questions. Other questions on any of these terms? Yes.
Chief Little Turtle.
Chief Little Turtle, he's the one who loses at the Battle of Fallen Timbers. When he loses, he's forced to sign the Treaty of Greenville, which pretty much sets the precedent of, we're going to take this land, you have that land over there. And we're going to keep moving westward and doing that over and over and over again.
Pontiac's Rebellion?
So Pontiac's Rebellion happens, and that will precipitate the line of proclamation line. So once the French and Indian War is over, actually before that, Americans were pouring across the border, right, going across the Appalachian Mountains. And then Pontiac starts a rebellion. He's like, get out of here. We don't want you here. This is our area. Get out. And so there's a fight going on all along the frontier, mostly up in the upper Appalachians into Michigan and Ohio, and they're fighting like crazy. And so the king says, you know what? Let's just draw a line and separate the two. So colonists will stay on this side of the Appalachians, natives will stay on that side of the Appalachians. Problem solved. But that doesn't solve the problem at all. What this line does is makes Americans extremely resentful. We fought in the war as well. We thought we were entitled to that land to grow and prosper and continue. Any other questions here? So, moving down, still 3.1, and now it's number 2. The desire of many colonists to assert ideas of self-government in the face of renewed British imperial efforts led to independence movement and war with Britain. The imperial struggles of the 18th century, as well as new efforts to collect taxes, because the British were broke by now, they need money. Without direct colonial representation. What's that cry again? That sounds familiar. Taxation without representation is what this one's all about. The colonies began to unite against constraints, and economic policies and activities, where they had never been united before. People in Massachusetts or in Virginia had more contact oftentimes with people in England than they did with each other, because the colonies weren't united at all whatsoever. But now we're going to start to see unity amongst colonists. Colonial leaders based their resistance to Britain on arguments about the rights of British subjects, the rights of the individual, traditions of self-rule, and ideas of enlightenment. People like John Locke that said all people are government's there to protect you, and all people are entitled to life, liberty, and property. The effort for American independence was energized by colonial leaders like Ben Franklin, as well as popular movements that included the political activism, laborers, artisans, and women. So what were the other people doing? We could easily see a question on this. What contributions did these groups, other groups, make to society in this time? The face of economic shortages, British military occupation, men and women mobilized in large numbers, provide financial and material support to the patriot cause. Despite considerable loyalist opposition, as well as Great Britain's overwhelming military advantage and financial advantages, the patriot cause succeeded, and because of colonial militias, Continental Army, George Washington, Joseph Roosevelt, military leadership, the colonists' ideological commitment, resilience, and assistance by European allies. You can easily see this would be that chart of strengths and weaknesses of the colonists, right, before the war, and Britain before the war. Let's go back up towards the top. Any questions on this stuff here? Yes.
Committees of correspondence.
So committees of correspondence were correspondence is writing that would write letters to each other. Hey, this is what they're doing here. They're restricting our freedom to do this, or we're restricting our taking taxes on this, or doing this stuff. What are they doing in your area? And so you see it on the American colonies, like I said, had nothing to do with each other. They become more and more and more increasingly together and united on this whole idea. So it's not a surprise that because of these things, people like the House of Burgesses, like George Washington, was advocating for, we should probably do something about this situation, just like people in Massachusetts were advocating for the exact same thing at that time. Other questions? Stamp Act, Townsend Act, Sons of Liberty, are all good with all those? Yes.
Lexington and Chronicle.
The first battles of the Revolution, as a matter of fact, they just happened in we're on our 250th year anniversary, if you're not aware of it. 250 years ago, on the 18th, which was that Saturday? 18th? 4 days ago. That would have been Saturday, right?
No, Saturday.
Friday. So Friday was the battles of Lexington and Concord happened 250 years ago. So our 250 year anniversary. So those are the first two battles of the war. And they actually could have predated, they could have had another one where more people were killed, but they just kind of let it go. So it didn't, because they were doing the same thing, trying to find weapons and stuff, and they shot out with some militia, but they just kind of, and then Lexington and Concord started a whole firestorm. Any other questions up here? Non-importation agreements? Daughters of Liberty? So that is the boycott, so that's what they turn to, and that becomes an effective tool. So when the Stamp Act comes in, they boycott the Stamp Act. They refuse to buy British goods and things. Like Ben Franklin said, hey, people nowadays want to just wear their old clothes over again. They're not buying stuff from Britain anymore, and once they do that, the merchants will put pressure on the politicians to change things. Yes?
Sam Adams.
Sam Adams, he is the leader, one of the leaders of the Sons of Liberty. So you have John Hancock and Sam Adams. These are the two leaders of the Sons of Liberty that are going to keep the Sons of Liberty and keep everyone riled up, because these things happen. All of these, well, next slide, well, we're going to see a little bit of it down here. You'll see these acts and these protest movements happen, but it happens over like a 4-year period. It's hard to keep people all angry all the time, but they're good at firing people up when they need to and keeping this movement kind of simmering the whole time, keeping us engaged. Yes?
We already mentioned Daughters of Liberty a couple of them.
Daughters of Liberty, so they're extremely important to keep the revolution moving. Even John Adams said that one daughter of liberty was more important than 9 noisy sons of liberty, because the guys all create all the problems. Yeah, we're gonna go get them. We're gonna do stuff. Yeah, but what are you gonna drink? Because we're not drinking tea anymore. So you got to make something else out of whatever. Well, how are we gonna keep our clothes together if we're not buying new clothes? How are we gonna continue this boycott? In other words, if the women don't step up and have to do all of the stuff that needs to make the boycott happen. Women are the ones who purchase stuff for the home. If they're gonna keep purchasing British goods, the boycott's not gonna be effective at all. But that means they gotta do more work. They gotta stitch up the clothes and keep them running. They gotta feed the family. They gotta, make sure they have something to drink besides tea. They gotta, like, make it all happen. Oh, I got one. I missed a whole one down here. Here. Despite considerable loyalist opposition, as well as Great Britain's apparently overwhelming, no, I didn't have one. So yeah, here's all the rest of this. This is pretty much the war as well. I notice the Battle of Saratoga is in there and French support's in there. And that was the only battle besides Lexington and Concord that really lends itself to anything. Yeah.
Saratoga was like a turning point, right?
Yeah, Saratoga is a turning point. So we beat a British army, and because of that, the French finally go, here, we're gonna support you openly and declare war on Britain. Not because they loved American independence, but because they hate the British.
Proclamation of Lord
Dunmore's proclamation is the slaves. Free the slaves, join us. He proclaims to the slaves, if you join us, you have your freedom guaranteed. So then the Americans can reintegrate African Americans who had been in the army, but then because of Southern pressure, they dropped them out, and then they came back into the army once again.
So the African Americans were fused and then out in the
Right, so at the very, the siege of Boston, there were African Americans in those siege lines, but then once Congress met, they're like, ooh, we don't want to start a slave rebellion, send them all home. So they couldn't have anyone at all whatsoever. And then once he did that, George Washington's like, my army is nothing, I need more troops, bring them back, and they did. Any other questions up here? So that is like the war. Now let's get to the next one, which is 3.2. Democratic and Republican ideals inspire new experiments with different forms of government. Now we're going to form our government. Now how are we going to form it? What's it going to look like? Where do we take our inspiration from? Enlightenment idea, the ideas that inspired the revolution, new beliefs about politics, religion, and society. So you have politics and religion together. Remember the Great Awakening.